time he picked up a microphone, the bodies were already behind him, and the family that raised him helped light the fuse. Stay with me, because once you see how this story starts, you'll never hear his music the same way again. A family story that turns dark. This isn't just the story of a rapper who came from the streets. It's the story of a family legacy forged in incarceration, surrounded by violence, shaped by loss, and held together by survival. A legacy that didn't just influence David King Von Bennett, but quietly molded him long before the world ever knew his name. To understand how he became known, not only for his vivid lyrics, but also for the real-world violence tied to his reputation, you have to start inside the Bennett household itself. Before the fame, before the money, before the viral songs and industry attention, there was a young boy growing up in an environment where danger was normal and absence was routine. He watched adults move with fear and respect, learned lessons without them being spoken, and absorbed a reality most children never face. Those early experiences planted seeds that would later define his identity. And the most important chapter of this story begins long before he was even old enough to understand what was happening around him. The Bennett name, power, absence, and street respect. The Bennett family didn't live an ordinary life, even by Chicago standards. David Bennett was born into a world where his father, Walter "Silk" Bennett, was known as a powerful and feared street figure, but one who was rarely home. Silk spent long stretches moving between the streets and jail cells, making his presence in David's life unpredictable and inconsistent. When he was around, he commanded attention without saying a word. His name alone carried authority, but when he disappeared behind bars, the silence in the household was heavy, leaving unanswered questions and emotional gaps that no one knew how to fill. In neighborhoods where survival often depends on reputation, the Bennett name carried serious weight. It brought protection, favors, and a certain level of immunity that most families didn't have, but that same name also came with danger. It painted a target on everyone connected to it, including children who had nothing to do with street politics. David grew up watching how adults reacted to his father. Conversations would stop, body language would change, people moved carefully around Silk, and David noticed all of it. Those moments quietly taught him what power looked like long before anyone explained it. For a child, that kind of environment blurs the line between admiration and fear. Respect didn't come from kindness or success, but from influence and intimidation. David learned that early, simply by watching. And just when that image of power began to feel permanent and untouchable, it disappeared in a single, violent moment, leaving behind confusion, anger, and a void that would shape everything that followed. A father taken, a child changed. When Walter "Silk" Bennett was killed in 2005, David was still a child, far too young to fully process what had been taken from him. The murder wasn't just a personal loss, it was a brutal lesson about how the world around him worked. In the environment David grew up in, death wasn't something distant or symbolic. It was sudden, violent, and permanent. The message was unavoidable. Power didn't guarantee safety, and respect couldn't stop a bullet. Even the most feared men could be erased without warning. After Silk's death, the family structure began to fracture under the weight of reality. David's mother was forced into survival mode almost overnight, working long hours just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. That struggle came at a cost. There was less supervision, less emotional guidance, and fewer moments of stability. Into that gap stepped the streets, offering attention, direction, and belonging where family no longer could. Those closest to David would later say his father's death changed him completely. He grew quieter, more observant, and emotionally guarded. The carefree child disappeared, replaced by someone constantly watching his surroundings and carrying unspoken pain. In neighborhoods like his, grief doesn't fade quietly, it hardens, and the way David learned to carry that pain would shape the rest of his life. Growing up fast in a place that doesn't wait. David didn't grow up in a world that allowed childhood to last. The area he lived in was dominated by long-standing gang rivalries, where violence was routine and retaliation was expected. Schools weren't safe zones, they were extensions of the streets. Kids learned codes early: who was who, where not to walk, what colors meant danger. With his father gone and his mother stretched thin, David gravitated toward older kids, already deep in street life. This wasn't rebellion for attention, it was education. He was learning how the neighborhood worked, how power moved, and how respect was earned. And in that environment, respect rarely came without fear. By his early teens, David was already affiliated with known crews connected to major Chicago gangs. This wasn't speculation, is something he later spoke about himself. He didn't stumble into this life. He walked into it knowingly, carrying his father's name and his own unresolved rage. But the moment that truly pushed him over the edge came on a day that should have been a celebration, the birthday that broke him. On his 18th birthday, David witnessed the killing of a close friend, a moment that permanently altered the course of his life. Birthdays are supposed to represent growth, reflection, and new beginnings. Instead, he became another brutal reminder that in his world, life could end without warning. Seeing someone he cared about die right in front of him didn't just cause pain, it reshaped how he viewed everything. Trauma like that doesn't fade with time. It embeds itself deep into a person's mindset and changes how they respond to the world. After that moment, something in David shifted for good. In later interviews and lyrics, he would point to this period as the point where his violence escalated. Law enforcement would eventually connect him to multiple shootings during this time, though it's important to be clear that many of these incidents were alleged and not all were proven in court. Even so, the emerging pattern was impossible to ignore. Police reports, witness accounts, and online activity suggested someone acting with intent rather than impulse. What set David apart was that he didn't try to stay invisible. He hinted at violence in his music, taunted rivals online, and spoke openly in ways that shocked even people accustomed to street life. That combination of action and bravado quickly built a reputation, one that followed him everywhere and defined how the world saw him. Music as confession, fame as amplifier. When David became King Von, the streets already knew his name. The music didn't create his reputation, it broadcast it. His lyrics were raw, detailed, and violent, often referencing events investigators believed were real. Fans called it authenticity. Law enforcement called it concerning. What separated him from other street rappers was how closely his music aligned with open cases and rumored incidents. Songs weren't metaphors. They sounded like first-hand accounts. Interviews didn't soften his image. They reinforced it. He spoke casually about violence, loyalty, and death, as if these were ordinary milestones. To fans, that honesty made him compelling. To critics, it raised serious questions. Was this art imitating life, or life bragging through art? Either way, fame acted like gasoline on a fire that was already burning. The more attention he got, the more the past followed him. And the family legacy that started it all never truly let him go. Generational trauma and the final outcome. The Bennett family didn't set out to create a monster. They were surviving in a system that failed them long before David was born. Incarceration, poverty, and violence weren't choices as much as constants, but exposure shapes behavior, especially when loss goes unhealed. David inherited more than his father's name. He inherited his environment, his enemies, and his unresolved grief. Without intervention, trauma turned into aggression, and aggression turned into identity. By the time success arrived, the damage was already done. His life ended violently, just like his father's. And in that ending, the cycle completed itself. The same streets that raised him, hardened him, and celebrated him ultimately took him too. Which leaves one final question that lingers long after the music fades. Was King Von a product of choice, or the inevitable result of a legacy that never gave him another option? Because once you understand how the Bennett family lived, loved, and lost, you realize this story was never just about rap. It was about what happens when trauma is inherited and no one knows how to stop it.